Welcome to the Soul's Kitchen podcast. Um, this is episode 12. I'm so pleased to welcome Danielle Hogan, who is a local to Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, a multimedia artist, recent author, and PhD. So we're going to talk about what has been cooking in her soul. She is someone who I've been wanting to talk to because on this podcast, I want to talk to people who are living their soul's purpose or their soul's desire. So welcome, Danielle.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, thank you for being here. So yes, so let's start at the beginning, if that's okay with you. Like,
Good. Yeah.
how did you become an artist, a maker of art?
How did I become a maker of art?
Yeah.
I think how I became a maker of art is one of it's sort of how when I talk about art, it's how I became an artist, and it's that there is no one point. I like to squish, as I always say, squish colors around, because I think that there's like a really I think there's joy in being given the freedom to play. And I had that from the very beginning as a child. My dad's brother, so my uncle, was a professional cartoonist. And, though I really appreciated and loved what he did, I think it was more the fact that both my parents were very open to me doing what brought me joy and making things, squishing color around,
I like
has
that
always
word.
brought me joy.
Squishing.
Squishing. I love that. It's my made up word. I stick to that word. That's what when I talk about moving color around on a canvas, on a sheet of watercolor paper, I regularly use my term squishing because it just feels so like you get right in there. It feels appropriate. So yeah. So I mean, in terms of starting, I always remember feeling like I was an artist. It was what I did. It's not something that I feel like any of my schooling gave me. It wasn't something that I felt like I needed to earn necessarily, which is also, something that I love. Like, I think that everyone can be an artist in terms of choosing to sink into the joy of making and creating. And then, it's, So I guess that's just to kind of get started. I think that's it. I'd say I've always felt like an artist.
That's so interesting because I don't think, I agree with you. I think everyone's an artist. I don't think a lot of kids grow up feeling like they're an artist. So do you mind maybe letting us know or tapping into like what did your parents, what do they do? Because I know you're a parent too. I'm a parent.
Yeah.
I always loved, my kids' creativity. So like, is it something, do you think that came from you or was it something that your parents were doing? Like, what did they both do, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, no. My dad, growing up, my dad worked in radio.
Okay.
And my mom was fantastic with numbers, so she did bookkeeping. So neither of them working in the arts, but definitely, I think, appreciated the joy that they saw that it brought me. And there was never any pressure at home for me to do a certain thing with my art. It was really just that they could see that I loved it. I mean, I know that for me, and certainly with my kids, neither of whom choose, at least at this point, to identify as artists. One of the things that I've always talked about with them is that art and being an artist isn't a label. It's a mode of communication, and it is also a willingness to experiment. I think that's what being a creative, being an artist is. It's sometimes a little bit scary to take it on as a thing you're willing to do, a way you engage. Not scary in a bad way, but scary in the sense that I think that creatives and artists, people who identify as a creative or as an artist, are open to taking risks. And when you take risks, you make mistakes, you fall down, and metaphorically or literally, and that's hard on the ego. Sometimes it's easier to do things where there's a really clear path. And I think that one of the things that's tough for a lot of creatives, and I'll just say myself, is that there's no clear path. There's lots of amazing, inspirational people to look to, but there's no clear path if you want to take it on as a career. However, if you identify as a creative or an artist, in a more, for me, like a more holistic sense, then to me that means appreciating the fact that being creative is, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier, like it's about communication. It's a mode of communication, and in that way, you can choose to use it when it serves you, and use it when words fail, or when other modes of making yourself understood or expressing something that you're looking to express, when other modes fail you. I think that and here I'm thinking about the visual arts, or the I don't like the term fine arts because it sort of implies a hierarchy, but I think that one of the unfortunate things when it comes to children and the arts is that at a certain point, it's like, we don't color anymore. We've moved on. And coloring or not coloring, I think that the message becomes creating has less value than reading, writing, math, all those things. And that's where I want to come back to the fact that for me, it is a mode of communication that I think gets, as a priority, gets undermined at a young age. And that never happened to me with my parents.
That is amazing. I love everything you say. Like, I want to talk about the fear after, but I love what you said about a mode of communication, because I also heard, or what I was hearing, is it's another form of intelligence that's not valued.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I really love what you said there, because you're right. Like, a lot of people have different intelligences, but what is measured in our school system is maybe 1 or 2 that is measured by a testing, that is only going to measure one way. So a lot of kids get left, that's why I find it so fascinating that you always felt like an artist, and that your parents, that's why I was asking about what your parents did. And I don't even know that they did anything, but they let you be, which is so amazing. They saw that.
Which is a lot. When you think about it, like and as a parent, like it can be scary to just let your kids be, right? Like to kind of stand by them. And
that's the best thing. Like that fear. So I want to talk about the fear, because again, I think part of my premise for this whole project for me is to do your soul's desire or purpose. Like, some people, they come out of the gate and they're just doing it. And I don't know if that's your story, and other people are just, they might leave like a 9-to-5 job, or realize that, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to like shift completely, take another turn and do whatever. And it's crossing that, or shifting out of fear or into the unknown with a certain amount of trust, I guess. So was that I don't get that that's your story, because I think, like you said, you kind of felt like you were supported, which is amazing.
Definitely. And still, I appreciate that, the fact that you brought up how scary it can be, because I mean, I'm scared all the time. I mean, I think that, one of the things about, I mean, and there's different levels of fear, right? We can be scared to try something new. We can be, but I mean, trying something new is, you can have like lowercase t try, and then big, uppercase T try, like you're going to, make a big like shift, and the consequences are much higher, but potential consequences. But I have a huge respect for all that, because I think that, it's uncomfortable to be scared. And I think that, one of the things, I guess, I don't want to, I mean, talk about fear. We also talk about creativity, and it's like a little bit of a mix of both. I'm being open to making mistakes, being wrong, getting to a point where you realize that, maybe this isn't quite the thing. I think all those things are scary and brave in equal measure. So yeah, I think I apologize, Lisa. I'm not sure I exactly answered your question, but
no, I think
I think my inside voice was like going off thinking about, what it means to try and sit with being afraid and sit with fear and different kinds of fear. And so, that's my.
Well, I think you just answered it. You did answer it, but right there, just what you said, like sit with it. And I think a lot of people, again, that's the fear part of it. They don't want to sit with it, so they'll do something else that's more comfortable, I guess. But when you sit with the fear, can you just talk a little bit about that? Like expand on sitting with the fear and what's on the other side of that? Because I think that's where a lot of people might be on the cusp, of, let's say there's a line here and they might be here, they might get to here, but then they have to go through here to get over here. And I don't know if my analogy is making sense, but what's on the other side of over here is like so much.
Yeah. Well,
That's what you
I
don't
think
know,
that,
the unknown.
yeah, the unknown. Yeah. Which, we all have to face every day in different ways. I think that when it comes to, I guess one of the things that I am always reminded of is that taking risks and the risks that people feel able or ready to take, look different for everybody on any given day. Like you can, like a parent, when you have, as an example, when you have children, taking a risk to do something, that is going to shift your reality in terms of your financial reality to go towards, your soul's desire. That's really tough because, from the outside, people might be thinking, someone might be thinking, you just need to do it. But the fear of, there's people have different kinds of responsibilities and different things that are holding them back. And so, I'm often reminded of how much you might see someone doing a small thing that seemingly small. I'm going to use the bunny ears, like seemingly small risk. But you know what? That could be huge because we have no idea how much courage it took or what they're weighing in terms of potential losses when they do those things. And we all experience loss differently, little loss and big losses. But I think that just to sort of bring back for myself into my sentences here, or what I'm having to say, the idea about creativity is just that I think that what anyone stands to gain from being open to letting in a little bit of creative risk, and what that little bit looks like for everyone is different, but the reward is so great, whether that's, the sense of pride that comes from, a small watercolor working out, whether it comes from, the excitement and that wonderful rush of I don't know. I'm not a great singer, but I try not to do what I dislike people doing about visual art and say, oh, I can't do that. So it's not that I do sing. I did pub choir with friends and things, but I'm not like a singer. But I try and remind myself that, saying I'm not this or I'm not that is just, removing ourselves sometimes from the joy that's possible in just simply allowing yourself to participate in things. And I think that, there's a lot of great stuff that comes our way when we choose to just be in community with other creatives, with other people who are experiencing joy and doing things they love. And you don't have to be as good as the person next to you at it in order to feel that joy.
Oh, that's amazing. I love everything you said. It's just, just doing. Like, I think we put so many labels on on what it is to be an artist, or what it is even to be a whatever it is you're doing, that we, like a doctor or a nurse or a teacher or whatever, that is the label, and that
Yeah.
all of the other things that you may be interested in, it's like you said, going to pub choir, like try singing.
Yeah.
You don't have to be excellent at singing, but you can still go and sing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, and even, I mean, just not to get, but like even just
Mm,
realizing that as someone who doesn't identify as a singer, but
mm.
the vibrations, the like making sound with other people in a room,
Oh,
it feels good,
that's
And
amazing. I don't
so,
know if you know, but in another podcast, I interviewed a sound healer who uses her voice in sound healing, and
no,
we
I
talked
didn't
about,
realize.
yeah, we talked about the vibration of the sound and the voice, and so that's really interesting that you mentioned that, because I think, again, being an artist or a creator um, opens yourself up to so much more um, intelligence than again just what we're judged on. And if people can just think outside the box a little bit, and or live outside the box, I think that's what I'm after. So let's, like,
Yeah.
I know you have a PhD. So what is your PhD in?
Yeah. So yeah, I feel very, very privileged to have
Mm,
had a chunk of time to really dig into a subject that means a lot to me in the arts.
okay.
And I mean, the things that resonate with me personally, it's not that I feel that they're, yeah,
Sorry, I
so I'll tell a
jumped
little
there.
story to tell you
I
how
do
I got there.
apologize because I totally jumped there, but I know that
It's
your
okay.
PhD is related. So yeah, thank you.
No, no, you don't need to apologize at
Okay.
all. No, I, it just always, so it still feels like a weird thing to say that I have a PhD
Okay.
I, um, because it's really just a privilege to have had so much time to look into something that I care
Mm,
about very deeply. Um, uh, so when I was studying in my undergrad, the end of my undergrad, I went to Emily Carr University in Vancouver,
oh
and
wow.
there I had, I mean, just an amazing experience of, in my Bachelor of Fine Arts, exposure to all these different studios. They kind of, move you through all these different experiences. So you can kind of see what feels really, good to you. And I really loved mold making. And
Mm,
this seems like a long lead up to the question about what I did for my PhD, but it maybe, joins the dots in a way that might have
mm,
value later in the conversation. So I started doing all this mold making, and they showed us how to do all these really cool things with like resin
mm,
and fiberglass. And I was making these things, and like living on the West Coast, where it's the landscape like here, but the landscape is dramatic and beautiful. Here on the east coast of Canada, in Wabanaki territory, it's like has like a really rugged beauty
mm,
here. And my experience of my time in the West Coast was uh, really formative for me, because I was spending more time outside, and there it had more of like my experience of it was that it was a softer, like lots of like moss and ferns
mm,
everywhere in the woods and things like that. And I was really struck as a student in art school that I was making these like hard plastic things. I liked the process that I was being introduced to,
mhm,
but I didn't really like the fact that I was making these plastic things that then just lived on forever as
mm,
plastic junk.
mhm,
Um, and so what I did was I switched to making things out of sugar, and then if they
mm,
would get damp or wet, they would like disintegrate. And I liked the idea. I kind of leaned into that idea of making sculptures that had more of like uh, um, that were ephemeral and that had
mm,
more of a lifespan. And then from that, in my graduate exhibition, um, people started, uh, you know, the feedback was a lot asking about like, oh, do you make that kind of art? Are you using sugar because women are sweet and like,
oh
like it's
really?
the kitchen and no, people, it's fine. Like people, we
Wow.
look for ways to understand something. We
Right.
think,
You're
and
right.
I mean, there is part of it that is negative. And one of the things, and this is where I'm going with kind of starting that far back in order to introduce my doctoral research, because, I got really, like I'm hugely passionate intersectional feminist, in that I think that no one is ahead unless we're all ahead. No one's life is you're not your work isn't done changing things until you've made until together we've found a way to make all people's lives better. And so I got thinking, like, I didn't really grow up doing a lot of cooking in the kitchen, which was one of the things that's coming up with that artwork. But one of the things I did do is my grandmother, on my mom's side, she taught me how to knit. And I loved it, except I'm a lefty and she was right-handed. My mother's right-handed. Both my parents were right-handed. And I would knit what was essentially like backwards to how my grandmother was trying to teach me. And so, like the creative brain, like you're making these connections, and I was making this sugar work, and I thought, okay, I like this, and I like that I like a lot of the things that it's referencing, that it's speaking to, that it's kind of pulling in the fact that I'm making my work in the kitchen, not in the resin studio with like like an HVAC, or not HVAC, that's not the right word, but a mask with like canisters on the side and a hood to help with fumes, and I thought, this feels more like what I want. This method of making speaks more to the core of what I want my work to be about and to speak about when I put it out in the world. And so, kind of fast forward a few years, I did my master's. I was still using quite a bit of sugar, but I was really thinking about, what skills I have that came to me in ways outside of like a formal education system. And then how is that valued if I was to pull it into the formal education and training I was getting? And so I started to be really interested in like soft sculptures, and it was around the time when like craftivism was you were just kind of hearing little teeny whispers about it from the UK. But sort of the circle that I was in at the time at school and living on Vancouver Island was a lot of like activists and people, like a lot of environmentalists, and of which I also consider myself. Those are matters that I care very deeply about. And I thought, okay, like, what if I started knitting my artworks and things like that? So then I'm just fast forwarded to that. What I ended up doing my research in for my doctorate was basically the devaluing of fiber in the art world broadly. And what I was talking about, and what I still believe to be true, although things improve bit by bit, slowly, it's rarely like a thunder strike, but is that textiles, and whether it's knitting, weaving, felted work, is so in our society, in our patriarchal society, so associated with the feminine, that the very nature of that association, because the materials themselves are not inherently feminine materials, or only for women, or even historically always created by women, but that our the culture we live in like sort of the global north, broadly speaking, tends to associate textiles with the feminine, and therefore that work is of lesser value when it comes to art making. And so that's the point that I was making in my work. And so it's a big part of the art that I make. I paint, but I also make soft sculpture. I love textiles. I still knit. And but I've, in over the years gotten into like quilting. I've done a bit of
Wow.
weaving, but my knowledge of weaving is far more research based than actual hands on. So
Okay.
yeah,
So multimedia really describes you then. Multimedia
yeah,
artist. Wow.
yeah,
Amazing.
yeah.
So tell
But
tell
I love that. I wish that for everybody, in the sense that, if we think of being creative and making things as something that is just a way of being in the world, then you
Mm,
can't limit it to just,
this is true.
whether you're in the kitchen or in the studio or, you
Yeah,
know,
that's true.
out in nature. Yeah.
Wow, that's a really good perspective on it, because I'm just, when you said that, I'm thinking like a lot of people don't consider cook or chefs an artist, but they are. They're working with another
Hells
media,
yeah.
another. I know, but you know what it is and it isn't. Like it is considered, but then it's sort of like only if you're of a certain caliber. But if you're creating, I guess you're creating. It doesn't matter what you're doing, right?
We have a
What you're
joke at
creating.
my house that
Mm.
my husband cooks like I make art, which is like, oh, look at that, and you get all these
Oh,
foods, and then it's like, what am I going to do with it?
I
And
love that.
I go to the kitchen, and I love food, and there are
Mm.
some things that I think that I am better at making in the
Okay.
kitchen than others, and I take pride in them. But certainly in our house, my husband, is hands down the more creative. Uh, in the kitchen, and so we joke that, like, I will open the fridge and I look and I'm like, yeah, there's no food, we have to go to the grocery store,
And
and
you
he opens the fridge and he's like,
like create a
and then we have this beautiful meal. I'm like, where
yeah.
did you even find that stuff? I would never put those together.
And then
So
and the
yeah.
same thing on the opposite of what you do, like with what you work with, like someone would look at some yard or something else and go, oh, what are we gonna do with that? And you would
Yeah.
be like, woo, let's make it
Oh,
up.
so good, so excited.
So
Exactly.
you're published. So tell us about what is your book about?
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you for asking.
Mm,
So my book is called Light and Material:
mm,
Weaving and the Work of Nell Oudemans. And Nell Oudemans was a renowned weaver who taught for a long time at the New Brunswick College of Craft and Design
okay.
here in Fredericton, New
Hmm.
Brunswick. And it's interesting that how I actually never met Nell, but not long after I finished my dissertation, I was introduced to Nancy Bauer, who is a well-known Fredericton author, by Jermaine Pataki-Terrio, who
Mm,
is, of the Pataki family, who owns Gallery 78 here in
right.
Fredericton. And the reason that Jermaine introduced me to Nancy was because she knew the subject matter of my she knew my research and knew my love and appreciation for textiles. And Nancy was trying to help Jack Bauer, so Nell's widow,
Hmm.
find someone to write a book celebrating Nell's legacy. And
Mm,
so they made the introduction, or Jermaine Pataki-Terrio made the introduction, and Nancy Bauer then introduced me to Nell's widow, Jack, who has since passed.
mm.
And sadly for me, before the book was, he
Oh,
had a chance to hold the book, but I like to think that on some level he knows it's done. We did it. We got across the
probably.
finish
Yeah.
line. Yeah, and I mean the book. It's interesting because it started as something that made sense in terms of my research area, like textiles, and being from Fredericton and having been both a student and a member of the faculty at one point at NBCCD. There was a lot of connections to Nell in that way, and so it made sense. But certainly over the years, because it was almost a 7-year project, like
Mm,
time frame from starting it to getting it to the publisher, it definitely became a labor of love because there were, it had many iterations. We sort of thought that it would be more catalog like initially, and that I would tell
mhm.
Nell's story, but that it would accompany an exhibition. And, as funding does, funding for the exhibition didn't work out. And so then, it was kind of like, okay, well, what is this book with, if it doesn't accompany an exhibition, where's the, how do I write it? How do I tell the story? Because when you tell stories, you have to think about your audience. Who you're talking to, what's going to, hopefully be of service to them. What are they going to enjoy reading? And so the next iteration of the book was far more kind of, I'm just going to say, like, classically academic, because I, had just finished writing a dissertation, and I have a very, very good friend who lives in St. John, and I adore her. Her name is Jennifer Perkins. She read it over for me, and her response was, "It's great. Is it for the university?" Essentially trying to help, like, kindly explaining to me that, it's academic writing. It's a more traditional kind. It's getting better. It's getting more, recognizing that, and obviously it depends on the discipline. Scientific writing has to have a certain kind of formula to it. But anyway, not to get off topic talking about academic writing, but I'll just own it. Mine was a bit dry. And so my third try was thinking just broadly about weavers, about people from New Brunswick, about people who love cloth. And I mean, my perspective is, at the end of the day, who doesn't love cloth? Because who doesn't have a favorite t-shirt, a favorite pair of jeans, a favorite blanket? It absolutely includes everyone. That was my third crack at the book, and hopefully that's what people feel from it. Is more of like we all know fabric, we all know textiles, and often we forget that someone had somewhere it was made somewhere.
Yeah, I love that, because you're right. A lot of people do. We wear clothes every day. It's like we eat food every day. It's sort of the thing where we don't think about where it came from. And when you start thinking about that, you start going down that line and what ingredient goes with what. It's the same thing with, like, fabric or even art. Like, how did this start? So I love that. You're right. We all are connected to it in some way, even if we just wear clothes. Or if you start thinking
we just wear clothes, and clothes,
where does the fabric come from? And who made it?
Bring us joy. They keep us warm. They help us tell the world who we are when we step out based on what we decide to wear. I mean, not that everyone has the same choices when it comes to, their ability to access clothing. Like, there's so much to it. But I think in that way, there's something about fabric that everyone can relate to. And I think that's really, an important point to make. And so in celebrating Nell Udeman's work, I mean, she was a very skilled spinner, weaver. She knew how to collect natural dyes and create natural dyes. And, but I don't think everyone needs to want to do that in order to read stories. Like, I'm a big reader, and I love to read about things I know I love, but I also love to find new things to love through what I read. And so, hopefully, this book will, maybe, if I'm lucky, be somewhere.
It's out in the world right now.
It's out in the world. Yeah.
Can you tell us where we can find it, or where we can find out more about you?
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, the book is, I feel like a little bit of a salesperson, but the book is available online at Chapters Indigo online. It's available Amazon and Barnes and Noble in the United States. So, and you can get it in ebook too. So, and because it's an art book with, with colored photos and things like that, it's a little bit more of an investment to have, like, a physical copy, but you can, get an e-copy for, I think it's like $9.99.
Okay, and the name of the book again, Danielle? Sorry.
Yeah, it's called Light and Material, which is actually a bit from Nell's own artist statement. So she talks about the importance of light and material. And then the subtitle is Weaving and the Work of Nell Udemans.
Okay, so I will link that in when I post this with this podcast. I'll link that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Thanks.
of course. So, in keeping with my theme of my podcast, I want to ask you a couple of questions about what is it that, I know you just published the book, but is there anything else that you're working towards right now?
Yeah. So I do these little paintings. I have this practice that's been a couple of, of years now.
I love those, by the way. Like,
Thank you.
You post on, okay.
I do. Yeah, I post them quite regularly. And I love these. They, So you asked what I was doing. I'll tell you what I'm doing, and then
Okay.
maybe I'll just talk a little bit about the work.
Okay.
So what I'm doing is I'm leaving in mid-April to show the work at an art school in Estonia.
Wow.
So I'm going to give a talk to the students, and I'll do a terrible job of pronouncing the school. So hopefully, one of your listeners in the podcast can do a better job and sort of teach me. But it's the Kola Art School in Estonia,
Okay.
and so they're really well renowned in Northern Europe for their printmaking and also ceramics.
Mm.
But they have a wide range of classes. And so I had met the director from the school in the past at a residency in Naples, Italy, and she invited me to come and speak to her students and to show the paintings. And so, so then I guess to circle back, I make these little paintings that it's been over 2 years now, and it started out one Christmas. I'd been like writing so much and doing, my Monday to Friday job is that I am responsible for New Brunswick's provincial art collection Art NB.
Okay.
And so, I was sort of saying to my family, like, I don't even know really who I am these days because I haven't made anything with my hands in so long. I mean, I know that sounds a bit dramatic, but I really do feel like having a chance to make something all the time, to
Right.
be making something. It doesn't have to be big, but
And
helps
since you're
kind of
not making
remind
dinner,
me, like,
your husband's making
yeah,
dinner. No, I'm just
yeah. He is,
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know if you can hear him on here, but he is actually in the
He's
kitchen making
making
dinner.
dinner now. Okay.
Yeah. But it helps to remind me, like, it helps me feel more grounded and connected to who I am. And so I had this fortuitous little visit to the art supply store here in Fredericton, Endeavors, shout out to Endeavors Art Supply.
Awesome.
And I found
Yeah.
these little 2-inch by 2-inch watercolor books. So they're little zigzag, like accordion folded books. And actually, funny, I didn't mean to do
Oh,
this. I just happened to
you
have
have
one
one.
right here in front of me.
Perfect. I love
And
it.
so I found these that first Christmas, and I was like, I said, okay, I've got 2 weeks of Christmas holidays, and these have like just enough little pages. And I thought to myself, I am going to commit to making one little 2-inch by 2-inch painting per day over Christmas. Because if I can't manage 2 inches by 2 inches over Christmas holidays, I'm not working, there's something wrong. And I started and I just kept painting and painting and painting. And
Wow.
I'm like, I mean, I've got at least, well, I decided the other day that I should probably create an Excel sheet and like catalog them, because I thought one time I was
You have a
showing
lot
some
now.
kids at one of the local schools I've been invited to show them. And I thought, they got excited and ran off with one because they were showing friends, where I'd never know because I have so many.
Right.
But anyway, it's become this like a big part of my practice. What at first was more of like a, the least I could do kind of thing, has become really for me something between, I now refer to it as something between like creating grocery lists and writing poems, because the subjects of them, like sometimes it'll have a theme like a poem and every little painting is based on a theme, and then sometimes it's kind of like a grocery list. It's literally like a little visual diary where I'm painting what I did each day or what I feel like something
Oh,
that's sort of affected me that's going
yeah.
on in the world.
That's really
So
beautiful.
yeah, so that's what so now it's become like a big part of my practice. Like I make these paintings. I made them at my father's bedside when he was in palliative care a couple summers ago, and he and I talked about, and my sister, we talked about really important memories of ours, of times we'd had together, and I made little paintings of these things
Right.
that
That's
the three of us love.
beautiful.
And so the topics really do range from groceries to far more, impactful events in my life. And I don't know what I'd do without them now. It's
That's
it's a really big
amazing.
part of how I am or what I do as a creative. So yeah.
And that's interesting you say that, because another question I had was, what brings you peace? And I'm thinking that like doing something creative or with your hands is probably the answer to that. Or sort of everything that you just said. Would that
It
be
does,
accurate?
I absolutely. You know, um, brings me peace. I mean, it's a beautiful question, and I think it's one that I probably have a very easy answer for, which is one of the things that brings me peace is certainly making,
Mm-hmm.
broadly, just
Mm-hmm.
making broadly.
Mm-hmm.
And then, on any given day, I could probably give you a more, you know, nuanced answer of what has brought me peace that day in terms of
Mm-hmm.
specifically what I was making, whether that was making time with my family,
Right.
making,
Oh,
making space for
yep.
someone to be more themselves in a conversation or to have, like, there's so many ways to make.
I love that.
But yeah,
That's
definitely that.
amazing.
Yeah,
Perfect.
definitely making. Sometimes more in the literal sense that people would think of,
Mm-hmm.
because I do identify as an artist per se, but I
Right.
think that the making broadly is absolutely what brings me peace. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for that answer. That's amazing. Yeah, making time, making space. I love all of that. It makes, I think a lot of people think that they're not doing anything if they're not actually doing anything, but sometimes we do have to have some quiet.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And one of the things, this is funny because it does have to do with art, but you made me think of it when you said, but sometimes people don't think they're doing anything, and I,
Mm.
when they're doing whatever, like insert seemingly small act
Right.
in that sentence. But I think that when we're present in whatever activity we're taking on, it's amazing the complexity of things that are actually happening in our brain and in our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that doing things with intention, whether it is making a grilled cheese sandwich for lunch, or
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing the things that it can it's amazing the other things that act of
Mm-hmm.
going through doing something with your hands can allow space for in your thinking. And that's that the creative, like the connection between that, the hand and mind, and how moving your hands can sometimes free up your mind to do other things, like to go deeper
Right.
into something else, because your hands are busy and there's like that, I don't know,
Mhm.
part of your brain that's like, okay, I am being productive right now, I am doing. But if
Right.
you can do something and like just slow, like do it, like
Mm.
pay attention to what you're doing, and it's that quieting down that I think allows for other really more impactful but less direct line thinking that's
Mm.
happening somewhere else in your in your head or in
Yeah.
your body. Yeah.
Oh, that's an amazing way to look at making a grilled cheese sandwich. I love it. All right, one last question for you. And because this is uh, the podcast is called The Soul's Kitchen. So
It's a
what would you
beautiful name for
say
a podcast.
what would you say is your main ingredient? And it doesn't have to be a food ingredient. It could be whatever word comes to mind. What's an ingredient for you in life?
uh Community, like
Mm,
people. It's
community of people. Love it.
I 100%, I think that I mean, I was going to say community is everything.
Mm, mm,
There's no one thing that can be everything, but I think it's hard to have much without community,
mm,
and like sitting with people, standing up for people, appreciating the people that are around you,
mhm,
recognizing that I couldn't do all the things that I love to do creatively, like, and I'll say
mhm,
here, like in my professional
mhm,
creative sphere, without people helping me, people, cheering me on. And I don't mean that in like a I do something special, someone cheers me on kind of way. I mean that, like, without my husband picking up the slack when I'm away at a
mhm,
residency, or my uh, um, all kinds of things. Like, I just, without
mhm,
my friends, my colleagues at work, my, you know, you just, it's the people
mhm.
around you, and recognizing how fortunate we are to have them around us, that I think is the ingredient that makes everything else so amazing.
Wow, I love that. Thank you for that.
Thank you for the question.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's been a real pleasure talking to you and listening to your story. Is there anything else you'd like to say? So people can find you on Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah.
And yeah.
On Instagram, it's Danielle Hogan Artist. I
Okay.
put that in there because there's actually a country singer in the States called
Oh,
Danielle
is it
Hogan.
really?
Yeah.
Well, people will
So,
be, given recent events, people will be looking for the Canadian version of Danielle
so I'm
Hogan.
the Canadian version
You're
of
the
Danielle
Canadian
Hogan.
version of Okay, awesome. Yep.
But sometimes when people will say, because I do also use my middle name with certain things or my middle initial, and it's really because there was a point where I was sort of how come you go to get
Right.
online to get a handle on Instagram or whatever, and it's like, oh, that's already taken, and then you look to see who your doppelganger
Right?
is, and it was like, oh, okay.
I know.
Anyway, I wish her well, but
Okay.
if anybody wants to know why it actually sometimes I use my middle name or things, it's to distinguish myself from the country singer.
What was the middle name again?
Oh, I use the C of my middle name, but it's Carla. So Danielle Carla Hogan. But yeah, my Instagram is Danielle Hogan Artist.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So we will look through there, and I'll post some links on this when I publish this podcast. Thank you so much, Danielle.
All the problems with social media, right?
No, but no, it's great. Same thing when I think I was looking for an email for myself, and it was like, how many Lisa Willoughbys can there be in the world? Well, there's quite a few.
Yeah,
and it was surprising. So I thought, I can't even use anyway. Yeah, I know what you mean.
yeah.
But there's only the one and only Canadian version of the Danielle Hogan Artist in the world.
The only one that I know of so far, anyway.
Yes,
so thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really, really just so flattered that you would even think to invite me to have conversation with you on the Soul's Kitchen. So I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it, and I loved our conversation. And yeah, I'm excited to see what you're doing next. And thank you for sharing your story on Soul's Kitchen.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thanks so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Danielle.
Bye-bye. Bye.